Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to Saturday's bonus. It gets us a little closer to Saturday Nightmares, live from New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you all there. Before we jump into this bonus, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's bonus, shall we?
Today's first part of the upload. In the first week of May 2020, I had an encounter that I'm still having problems coming to terms with. Due to reasons I will explain in my story, I am not comfortable with giving my name or the details of exactly where this happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm a lover of the outdoors, and in the past few years have not had the time to really get out into nature and get my much-needed dose of the natural world. In 2019, I opened my own online business, and due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic and the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of this year. I have 2 children who are now very responsible and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at the local hospital and is considered an essential worker. So, the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I turned 40 this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I had some time on my hands and was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with my laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days to go fishing and breathe some fresh air. Neither of my teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work. So I took my best friend with me, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he's incredibly lazy. I have never had to worry about him running off to chase deer or anything. He will lie on his blanket next to the fire all day and night unless I make him head out with me. But as I've learned while camping with Pete, if coyotes, bears, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of his laziness and protects the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he's 120 pounds of muscle with no fat, which also blows my mind because of how lazy and inactive he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back. But this time I decided I really wanted to have as many comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV and filled it with all the things I would really want to be comfy. I brought my full-sized backyard grill, my 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers full of food, and a fancy 6-person tent. The campground I decided to go to is a very large one that is mostly used by RV kind of crowd. But on the far end, right next to the best fishing area, they have a half a dozen of just plain old campsites with no power or water hookups. My campsite is bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from the large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rock overhangs and small caves. It's a beautiful area, and I love falling asleep to the sound of water. I set up my camp so my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy make sort of a U shape and block most of the view into my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week, starting on Friday, May 1st, which was the first day that the state opened up the state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shut down. Back in March, I arrived at the campground about midday on Friday and the place was packed. I spent most of my day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking ribeye steaks, burgers, vegetables on the grill. The weather in central PA in early May is pretty much perfect, so I decided to sleep in my tent each night with Pete, and turned my trailer into my mobile office where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work an hour or so each morning, get my orders packed up, and drive 20 minutes into the nearest town once every few days to get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and children just to sell everything and move into the woods and live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see. So I decided to do some hiking and exploring in the surrounding wilderness with Pete, instead of fighting 10 people for the same one fish all day. It felt great just to get out to where I really belonged, the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off all weekend while I was hiking, but to be honest, when you camp in PA, you should expect to get rained on regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, the campground cleared out fast, and by sundown, there were only a few active campsites left. I'd gotten to know 2 guys in the campsite directly next to mine, so we hung out for a few hours a night while I drank hot tea and they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me as a next-door neighbor, with my full-sized grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next few days, I worked online, fished the creek, explored the mountains of the area on foot with my dog. We also like to just walk the campground itself and stop and talk with scattered campers who are there during the weekdays. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made its way into a more accessible side of the campground and raided their camps the night before. This had me a little concerned because I had that full-sized grill sitting out in the open at my camp that had been cooking delicious food for days on end. I debated on putting the grill inside my enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central PA has a rather large black bear population, and I was already aware of this. So at night I slept with my Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck in the tent with Pete. And just in case a rogue bear posed danger to us, I had forgotten to pack my Ruger Red Hawk 44 mag for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my S&W Shield 45 ACP that I already had on my hip when I left home. It was not ideal, but I figured it was better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my new friends and I cooked up some barbecued chicken thighs, baked beans, and some baked potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil in my fire pit. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made a few orange soda spiked drinks to go along with our fancy campsite dinner. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had worn us out a little early, so we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night, a night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. At about 10 p.m., I loaded 4 shells of buckshot into my shotgun, got in my tent, got all squared away, and lied down in the tent with my dog right next to me on his bed and blanket. I put some Citizens Journal news on my phone and put one headphone in my right ear and kept my left ear clear to listen to my surroundings and enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to the tree line with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs and insects at night was super loud, and is kind of a song that puts me to sleep better than any lullaby ever could. The next thing I remember is waking up and my eyes popping open to some kind of hollow metallic noise outside of my campsite. I lie there perfectly still with my heart slamming from the quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang! I heard the lid on my grill slam shut. I had stuck a fairly bright solar-powered motion light on the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped court area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on, and someone or something was moving around my camp, casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he was still lying down, but his head was up and his eyes were as big as ping pong balls. He was clearly hearing what I was hearing, but I found it strange that he was silent. It was just then that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs, insects in the woods behind me was not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was hoarse, deep breathing. That was when I thought myself bare. I could hear it walking around, thump, thump, thump. And next I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat up and grabbed my shotgun. One thing about black bears is they are not the bravest animals, and any man-made noise will usually make them run for their lives. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered a shell. Instead of running off, the creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel the fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. To my horror, it started walking toward my tent. It was then that I saw its shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came up to the front of my tent, breathing like a gigantic monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, I have a 12 gauge pointed right at you, so you better sound off who you are." Right then, it leaned forward right up to my tent and let out the most terrifying deep growl I have ever heard in my life. At that moment, Pete whined softly and cowered his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had a giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it was growling at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight on the creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw its eyes light up a golden LED light. It turned its face toward the flashlight, and I could hear the man gasp and say, "Holy shit." Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. I decided that if I didn't do something, this thing was going to kill us. So I lie back onto my sleeping pad, took aim at the shadow of this monstrous head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. The monster screamed and roared at the same time. It was like the death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a big lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking ferociously. The thing ran off, and from what I could tell from the loud thump, it ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up, quickly unzipped my tent, and poked my head outside to see. It got up onto its feet, and then it ran straight into the picnic table, did a flip onto the ground. It started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see blood was everywhere on the trailer. I jumped out of the tent while chambering another shell. I aimed as best as I could, with my whole body shaking violently. And right as it stood up again, I shot it the second time. I'm not entirely sure that I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up. I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it again. I was so terrified and taken back at how tall it was when it stood up that I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire erupt from behind me and turned to see my neighbor unloading a large revolver into this werewolf-looking thing at maybe 20 yards. The creature was on its side and was kind of running in circles on the ground, gurgling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it was gasping. As it was doing this death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer to me, so I tried to pump the gun again, and was shaking so bad that it took 3 attempts before the last shell entered the chamber. I just pointed and shot without aiming and could see the hump on its back of its neck rip open and spray blood and flesh all over the place. I was really close to it at this point. The monster stopped flipping out, and its limbs were twitching while its head remained fully animated and flopping back and forth for at least another 10 seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it and tried to stand up. I realized once I stood up that I'd been holding my breath the whole time, and when I got to my feet, my vision started to go black and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed my arms and started to pull me back, away from this monster. I stood up shaking badly and looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of terror. When I started looking around, there was at least another 5 people showing up there with the same wild-eyed expressions. I saw that at least 3 of them had come over with their guns. People were yelling and asking each other what had happened, and checked to see if I was injured because I had blood on my clothes and my face. It all happened quickly, but, as it often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed like it was all in slow motion to me. My dog was still barking and going crazy, so I did my best to calm him down. When I hugged him, he was shaking as much as I was. Before long, a small crowd had formed, and people were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached this thing as it lie there, still occasionally twitching. We all stood over it saying, "What the fuck?" over and over. Eventually, we all started saying, "It's a werewolf," in disbelief. All at once, people started taking pictures with their phones. Mine was still in the tent. The wolfman was dead. The top half of his head was basically gone, including both of his eyes and the top of his snout. I assume that was the first shot I made from the tent. The front of its neck was completely shredded, and the back of its neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what other injuries it had sustained, as it was completely covered from head to toe with blood. But we were all pretty sure it had taken buckshot or .357 magnums to the chest as well. There was a small river of blood running through the camp and right past my tent from a puddle that surrounded the beast. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few minutes we summoned the courage to grab some big sticks and flip it onto its back. It most definitely was a male, as it had a huge set of balls bigger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I had ever seen. It had dog-like legs, weird-shaped paws with kind of small heel for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed that it was able to balance such a big body on feet so small. It had really skinny lower legs and pretty thick upper legs. It had arms pretty much like a human with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws, maybe 3 to 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half of a finger from the battle. The second wave of terror hit us all at once. The howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see that same big-eyed look over everyone's face. I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded my shotgun with 5 rounds this time and grabbed my .45 as well, and clipped it to my side inside of my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at the werewolf and all looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up for a few minutes, and we could hear the howling getting further and further away. The police, game wardens, paramedics showed up all at once. I could see the flashing lights that they had blocked the entrance to the campground up the hill in the distance. The cops were just as surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw the creature. The 2 game wardens looked worried, not surprised. They told everyone not to take any pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the whole time from then on. Paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital to get checked out, but I refused. The only injury I had was my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days from all the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looking worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and the revolver from the neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away, and anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off their phones, which was not much of a problem as only a few people's phones got signal in the campground. When I asked the game wardens what the hell that thing was, they told me they didn't know, but that it looked like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys showed up. They were all carrying large Glocks and dressed in cargo pants and t-shirts. They immediately took me and the others who were involved aside and began questioning. They told me that they were with the Federal Fish and Game. They were very interested in the howling we heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about where it was, how close it sounded, and what it sounded like, etc. They also repeated to me 100 times that I was not to tell anyone what happened, and they would get to the bottom of things and find out what I had encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assume they told my neighbor and anyone else who was on the scene to say the same thing. They made us open our phones and go through our photos, delete the pics we took one at a time. They also told me that if any pictures were to come out of this creature, that would spell trouble for anyone who had them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They did not want to pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and politely asked me not to talk about it and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only about 2 hours before this Dogman showed up. By about 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten to everyone in the campground, and I assumed other people were told it was a bear and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said that it was not safe, and they had to close the campground until they were sure it was safe again. After the Dogman was bag-tagged, a small fire truck was brought in, and all of the blood was hosed off my trailer, vehicle, tables, and everywhere else. The blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped down my trailer and a vehicle with soapy water and hosed them off again. Regular old duct tape was put over the holes in my trailer, and they took my tent, bloody clothes, and bloody slippers as evidence along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave it back. They gave my shotgun back, that is, wiped down and unloaded. They told me to fill my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times to me. Since all of this, I've learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listened to the Dogman and Wolfman encounters day and night, and that is how I came across your channel. I figured I'd reach out to you. I'm amazed that the authorities were able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wraps. I've been searching for anyone who came forward with anything about this campground closing in the news, and nothing. I'm not interested in putting myself out there any more than just this for now. I'm almost as scared of the agents as I was of the Dogman, but all in all, they seem genuinely concerned for my well-being. Then I got a second email. I narrated this. This was sent to me in May, actually, of 2020. He sent me a second email and did not share this encounter with any other channels until about 9 months afterward. So if you guys have heard this on other channels, you haven't heard these emails between he and I, other than on my channel. I trust that you're a good person and all, but I fear that they may be watching you due to your other uploads of yours I've listened to about the dude named Victor. I find it interesting that one agent that really had me cornered for a while that night had a thick southern accent. I suppose he may have come from your friend's Virginia group. I will see if I can put together an online phone number and call you while on proxy server. I'm sorry for the paranoia, but life has been going really well with the exception of this encounter. I am terrified of those guys, agents, fucking up my life. I can't afford things to go sideways for my family right now. My state of mind is pretty jumpy these days. I won't even take my trash cans out without my big revolver. If I do get set up together to call you, what's the best time? If you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and email them to me. I will make sure to check this account for you each day. Third email. We're responding, but I'm not including what I'm putting in. Third email. I was reading through the comments on the show of my story. A few people had questions, it seems. No, none of the guys in the Denali had long guns, just large Glocks. I asked the older southern gentleman what kind he had. He said a Glock 20, 10mm. I really didn't give all that much detail in the description of this monster looking back in the email to you. The dead Dogman smelled horrible, like the combination of barnyard animal mixed with strong dog piss. Also, it did have a tail, a small tail, maybe 2 feet at the longest. The Dogman was dark brown all over. Oddly enough, I do remember that it had some lighter brown stripes on its arms where the blood wasn't totally soaked in the upper arm area. It was fluffy with fur. Not the sparse, hairy thing I hear others talk about in their encounters. This one was fully covered in fur like an actual dog. Even its arms and legs. But when it stood up in front of me, it did seem to have some white in the middle of its chest. I could be wrong because I only saw it that way for a second. The next time I saw its chest, it was covered completely in blood. The skin on the tip of its snout and under its bottom jaw were both sheared off from the buckshot. But its teeth were undamaged. As it lay there, it had its mouth opened, and its teeth were very weird. All of them were pointed and seemed like they would fit together, like a shark's teeth or an alligator. The teeth were bloody, but very visible. They seemed unnatural to me. My college major involved the study of teeth and fossils, so I have a good understanding of tooth structure and which type of teeth were designed for what. And it would seem that these teeth would be only used for biting large chunks of flesh off to be swallowed whole like a shark or a gator. They were not reminiscent of the normal canine teeth in that way. After listening to hundreds of encounters in the past few months, a common theme is that they seem to like the softer, inner organs of their prey, while often leaving the meat behind. I wonder if that's because they swallow their food in large chunks. And obviously, softer organs would be much easier than dealing with bone and tougher muscle. Just a thought. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I just have to say it. There was a feeling of something supernatural from the beginning. I can't describe it, but a feeling of something supernatural was even in the air. Even when I thought it was a bear, it's like everything felt wrong and reality had ceased to exist for a moment. How would every frog, insect for 100 yards know to keep quiet? Why would the land animal like a Dogman have teeth like a gator? How did it keep flipping out and running around with its brains falling out of the top of its head? The very air around me felt like a weird charge. I feel like there is something important about these creatures that we just don't understand quite yet. Something supernatural. Give me some time. I will Skype number together this week or next week. Give you a call. What's a good time and day for you usually? Fourth email. I've been having weird things going on. Someone's been calling my phone from different international phone numbers and hanging up on me after 10 seconds of silence. I can tell it's a landline by the noise it makes when they hang up. It also lets me know that it's an actual person and not a robocall. The black SUV with the guy who wears the headset with microphone has been outside of my house in early morning. He leaves right before 6:30 a.m., right about the beginning when rush hour starts. Yesterday, a white Range Rover pulled into my driveway in the middle of the day. I happened to be working in my kitchen when it happened, so I was facing the window when it did. I saw the two guys in the vehicle, sitting there scanning my house and talking to each other. I always carry a gun now, even when I'm home alone with the kids, so I popped the button on my holster and went to the front door and quickly opened it. The two guys looked at me and casually pulled out of my driveway. I did notice that they had out-of-state license plate because it was just plain white. definitely not Delaware. I'm sorry for this, Jeff, but I'm going to have to stop corresponding for a while. I can't help but notice that this stuff started happening after contacting you. I could just be paranoid, like I told you previously. I have a happy, almost perfect life right now. I have a lot to lose. I hope you understand. Feel free to let your listeners know. So I just let it lay and die down, and then I emailed him back in February. Hey, it's Jeff Nadolny. How are you? I'm reaching out to make sure you're okay. I'd love to speak with you sometime. Of course, I'll honor the stipulations. Then he responds, I'm fine. I've not seen anything weird or had any Men in Black types watching me for a while now. I've made up my mind to not do any kind of interviews or talk directly with anyone for their safety as well as my own. I'm still shocked that none of the pictures taken that night slipped through the cracks and came out online. I've made up my mind just to send the encounter to other numerous cryptid channels and give it more exposure to your peers and their listeners. I have to think that more than one person there that night had gone online looking to see if the story made it into the world beyond their campsite experience. If so, I'm hoping that someone has more balls than me, found their way to hide a few pics or a few minutes of video from those guys in the SUV, and will anonymously leak it out somewhere. Thanks for doing your part and spread the word of my encounter, as well as many others. If I had not had the experience I had, I certainly would have looked at stories like those on your channel and your source Victor as ridiculous, but I would imagine that with all real-life monsters roaming in populated campsites and neighborhoods, that the government would indeed have some kind of task force to deal with them. So don't worry about me, I'm fine, and let's hope someone else has a few pictures that can break this thing wide open. And that's what he did. He sent the story out to Swamp Dweller and whatever lurks beneath and a couple other places. Crazy story, and I really kind of, I don't know, I was really concerned about this guy for a while. I mean, for almost six months, I emailed him, and he never responded. And then, just out of the blue, he responded back. So, I mean, it's, all fine and dandy that he's looking to find, this exposure of this encounter and try to find these photos, because I'm pretty sure other people have, at least gone onto the web and looked, like you said. But, I don't know. He kind of like, the 8 months of not emailing me kind of just, I don't know. It made me worry about him, and it was just not really cool in my eyes. I wish the guy nothing but the best. But I really, truly wish he had just at least emailed me periodically so I know he was okay. The interview would be cool, but that's just something extra, I just wanted to know he was okay. So, but every time I emailed him, he must have thought that I wanted an interview. I don't know. Maybe he'll give it to Swamp Dweller or some shit. I don't know. Who cares? But anyway, it was a crazy story, and it really, it's one that'll resonate with me for the rest of my life. And I do hope one day I do get to talk to him, because super nice guy, and I understand what he's saying, but just, I was so worried about him, to be honest. I truly, truly did worry, so. But the next part of this upload, we're going to continue on to the killing of Dogman. Now, I just had this interview the other day, and there's a reason why I'm putting this in here, and it's because it's one of the very few. But at the end, we'll all figure out why. Jeff, please don't say who I am. The encounter my brother and I happened in the late 80s or early 90s, not really sure. It was the second day of deer season in southern Ohio. My brother had a .358 Winchester, I had a .308 Ruger, which we are not supposed to use to be hunting with. The farm we hunted on was rented by my dad's brother. I've hunted this farm since 1966, when I had turned 13. The day I started, early like all deer hunts do for us, on the stand by 5:30. I was sitting on a fallen log with my back to the woods, facing a freshly shelled cornfield. My brother was 50 to 60 yards to my right, sitting on a tree stump facing that same field. Around 10, my brother started shooting, so I stepped out to maybe get a shot at a deer also. Only when I stepped out, it was not a deer my brother was shooting at, but what looked like a giant German shepherd charging at him on two legs, on its hind legs. So I raised my rifle and shot, hitting it in the right shoulder. The second shot hit it in the head. It fell down right as it was swiping at my brother and ran down to where my brother lay. He had a slash on his left shoulder. I think his coat kept it from being worse. So we got to our Jeep and I took him back to our uncle's and called the squad. When it came, so did the sheriff and ODNR, because my aunt said it was a wild animal attack. A friend I knew from ODNR was hunting on another farm. He arrived also. My brother went with the squad, and I took everyone back to look at what we described to look at. No one believed us, so seeing is believing. This thing we had shot looked like a werewolf. Long black hair like a wolf, its belly fur was white, paws and fingers like a raccoon, only huge, and claws 3 to 4 inches long. Rear feet like a raccoon, only 15 inches long. Teeth like a giant dog or wolf, very muscular upper body. Legs were very not wolf-like in that way, more man-like. Long, dog-like muzzle, pointed ears on top of the head. My brother had shot it 4 times in the chest area. I had shot it 2 times, once in the right shoulder area and the head shot. No one from the ODNR or sheriff knew what it was, and they took tons of pics of it. It was before I had cell phone and didn't have a camera. Asked my friend from the ODNR if he would get me and my brother some of the pics. He said yes, and a few weeks later I asked him about the pics and he said none of them developed. This is what my brother told how this unfolded. He saw 3 what he thought were German shepherds running across the cornfield, kind of loping along toward him. And he didn't give it much thought because the neighbor's farm had some dogs, but as they came closer he noticed they were huge, so he started keeping a closer eye on them. He said they got about 100 to 125 yards and they stopped. He said the larger one growled and looked like it was smiling or grinning. The other 2 started running to my brother's right, and the larger one stood up on its hind legs and charged at him. That's when he started shooting. And I came into the picture. They decided to wait till the next day to retrieve the body, so they left a new ODNR game warden there to stay overnight, and all through the night he heard howls and shrieks. His words. He had fallen asleep later and woke up sometime around 8. The werewolf body was gone. Nothing was ever done or said about it that I know of ever again. Also, on the new ODNR guy, there was a strange handprint on the doors. Also, I've asked my now retired ODNR friend about the pics several times, usually every time I see him. He now says he doesn't know what I'm talking about. Also, this thing looked like a werewolf from Van Helsing movie, exactly like my brother was. Fine, just giant scratches on his shoulders, across his chest. Can't hardly see him today. Gave up hunting after that, my brother did. I still hunt there to this day, but always take plenty of firepower and ammo. Me and him talk about it, some, but he won't talk to anyone else about it. And you are the only one I ever told this story to, other than my family. If you think the story's worth sharing, you may do so. Just don't say who wrote it. And then I get a couple of other ones. Jeff Brothers' injuries were listed as a dog bite. Also, Jeff, it was first day of gun season in Ohio. Second, things smelled really bad, like a wet dog, roadkill. That was the first few days old. Don't know if said that before. Sorry, Jeff, old memory. Creature was around 7.5 feet tall. My brother said when he first saw them, they were on all fours, but walking very odd, and also said when the big one charged on its hind legs, the other two ran off on all fours. And like he said, he was really nervous sharing that, but he did talk to his brother. It was the second day of hunting season, not the first. That was a great interview. I mean, I had a really good interview a couple days before that with Selena, and then Randy came on. And, I don't know if I'm greedy or not, but I would really, really love to hear his brother tell this encounter in his words too. But I understand and respect his, where he stands. Some people just don't, they just shut right down, and I can't blame the guy for that. God bless him, So anyway, moving on. Now moving on to the next one. Before I share this story, I'm not claiming ownership of it. This happened to a friend of mine and his two cousins. My friend just decided to share this with me. A few weeks ago, my uncle and two cousins came out to visit my mom and dad for a barbecue. We have one every year on the 1st of May, because it happens to be my mom and dad's anniversary. So it's the 1st of May, and my uncle and two cousins get out to our house. We had just moved back in February, so we were all excited to have our first get-together out there. It was really nice. We're situated on a mountaintop with a decently sized yard that was completely surrounded with woods. My dad had plans to clear out a few sections of woods so he could put some deer feeders out, and he could get a chance of getting some hunting out there. Well, he hadn't started preparing to begin cutting the trees down. He decided to test the waters, as he phrased it, and put about 8 to 9 trail cams out to see if there were any deer worth hunting this year. I helped him out with setting all the trail cams up, finding good spots, and figuring out what position they should be facing. Then that was the end of that. So, while my dad and uncle were hovering over the grill, me and my two cousins decided to relieve our boredom by playing around in the backyard. We had a trampoline set up. The original owners of the house had decided to include their pool in the deal, along with the volleyball court they made on the far side of the pool, bordering the woods. So me and my two cousins were enjoying ourselves on the trampoline without a care in the world. After a short while, my dad and uncle came to us and announced, "Hey, dinner's ready." So we all went inside and grabbed a plate and then went back outside to our back deck and sat there and ate. Me and my dad were the first ones finished eating. My dad looked at me and suggested that we should go out and check the trail cams. We had done this many times before, sometimes even checking 3 or 4 times a week just to see what was out in the woods. However, this time would be a little different. Me and my dad are going around the property checking all the trail cams. We got to the point where we only hadn't checked one of them, but for some reason we couldn't manage to even find it. After searching around for almost 10 minutes, we eventually found the exact tree it should have been on. I remember placing it on the specific tree, and it was one of those trees that once you saw it again after the first time, it was damn near impossible not to recognize it. So my dad came up to me and started looking around, questioning that I had put the trail cam on this specific tree. I told him several times that I was 100% positive that this was the tree I placed the camera on. We started circling the tree, looking for any signs of our missing trail cam. While we're shuffling around trying to find it, I kicked something hard. I tripped over myself and looked down at my feet to see what I had tripped on. And there it was. Well, what was left of it. The trail cam. My dad came over to me and he saw it just as clearly as I did. The trail cam was completely and utterly destroyed. Upon further examination of the trail camera, we learned that a heavy-duty ratchet strap that we used to secure it around this tree had been torn apart. Literally, it looked as if something had grabbed the trail cam and just ripped it completely from the tree, and then just went town to town destroying it. My dad, thinking that whatever did this must have stepped into the range of the trail cam, and it could have taken a picture of it. So he tried to open the trail cam, but no success. This trail cam, which was damn near indestructible, was damaged so badly to the point where my dad couldn't even open it. My dad, not wanting to admit defeat, grabbed his knife and exclaimed that he was going to get the damn thing open, or at least get to the memory card. That was all he seemed to care about at that moment. So after a few minutes of forcing his knife into the trail cam, he finally managed to get it open. It took him a second to fully realize where the spot for the memory chip was supposed to be in the tangled mess inside of the camera. When he finally found the spot for the memory card, he pulled it out, and, to his utter disbelief, the card had been broken into several different pieces while inside the camera. My dad was beyond pissed at this point, because not only did he lose a $150 trail cam, he also lost his only chance of figuring out what did this. Now, even more pissed than before, he said, "Let's go check back to the house." He picked up the trail cam, and we both headed back to the house. He told the others what had happened to the trail cams and then showed them. Fast forward to that night. My dad, my uncle, me, my two cousins all went into the woods, just practically clinging to hope that one of the other trail cams had spotted the thing that destroyed one of our cams, since me and my dad had checked them. My uncle went with my dad, so it was me and my two cousins together. So we began checking every single trail cam. So my cousins and I are heading toward the location of our third camera, so just relieve the memory card, because my dad had told us just to grab the memory cards and he will search them together. We got about 15 yards away from the third camera, and in an instant a chill ran from the top of my head all the way to both my feet. I told my cousins about this, and they said, "Wow, we feel it too." We all started panning, looking to see if we could see anything at all. Then I picked up on something in the direction we were heading to get the camera. I saw a figure. Me thinking it was either my dad or my uncle, I called out and said hello. Then it looked right at me and my cousins. I knew immediately that it was neither my dad or uncle, because it had glowing red eyes. At first glance I thought maybe it was an animal like a deer, thinking that it was just reflecting the lights off our flashlights back onto us. But that theory went straight out the window when we turned our flashlights away from it, and it stood up. I watched in utter horror and disbelief as it stood up, very slowly, from about the level a deer would be, to being about 9 feet off the ground. As me and my cousins were standing there in shock, it let out a deep guttural growl and started advancing towards us. I was the first to snap out of this sort of trance I was in, and grabbed both my cousins to try to get them to move so we could run. One of my cousins managed to get out of the trance as well, and we both tried to get the other out of it. My other cousin finally showed a sign that he was out of the trance, and just before I could utter a word to run fast, this thing leapt into the air and landed on top of my cousin and took the longest to snap out of it. Myself and other cousin fell to the ground as this creature landed. Then it let out a loud growl and began getting off my cousin and grabbed him by his throat. It lifted him up off the ground and roared directly into his face before looking at my other cousin, the one who was just getting back to his feet. The creature threw the first one away from it and then hit the other one across the face, causing him to go right back down to the ground. It then looked directly at me. It took one gigantic step forward and lifted me off the ground as well, then did the same roar it had done to my cousin, only much louder. I yelled for my cousins to run if they could. One cousin was helping his brother get back to his feet after being thrown, and they looked at each other, then to the creature, and decided there was only one thing to do. In desperation, they picked up a fallen tree branch from the ground and charged at the creature. One of my cousins connected a swing to its head, while the other went directly for the arm of the creature, the one it had me in. The force of the blow of the creature's head caused it to falter, while the creature managed to right itself and caught both incoming blows going directly for its head. It grabbed both my cousins in each hand, one in each hand, then threw them away from it, causing my cousins to drop the branches they were using as weapons and fall back to the ground. All three of us got up and tried to run, but the creature swung one of its arms and connected to all three of our chests, causing us to fall down again. The creature reared back its head and let out the most terrifying roar I've ever heard, then started to move toward us. Just then a gunshot rang out, then another, then another. All shots connected to the creature. I looked up in time to see the creature fall to the ground, appearing to be lifeless. I looked over my shoulder and saw my dad and uncle both standing there white as sheets, both holding a gun in their hand. They both hurried over to me and my cousins and told us to run back to the house immediately, fearing the creature may not be dead. Both of my cousins booked it back to the house, whereas I did not. I wanted revenge. I wanted it dead, for good. I jerked the gun out of my uncle's hand and proceeded to empty the last mag into the thing's chest. Once I was sure it was dead, I hit it across the face with the shoulder stock of the gun, spat in its face, and screamed, "How you like that, bitch?" I handed my uncle back the gun, which he immediately loaded another mag into it. I walked past my dad and headed back toward the house with my uncle and dad following close behind. We got to the edge of the woods and started making our way across a small field to get to the house. Then out of nowhere we heard several more growls and roars, sounding almost exactly like the creature we had just killed. Hearing this, then immediately my dad screamed for us to run, so we did. All three of us started to book it back to the house as fast as we could. We hopped about a 4-foot tall chain-link fence that made up the dimensions of our front yard and ran to the stairs, up onto the front porch. My dad and uncle both turned and started firing their guns. Not at anything, almost like they were trying to scare off the creatures. That was until one of them showed itself, then both, my uncle and dad, shot it at the same time. It fell on the ground lifeless, then everything went silent. No more growls or roars were heard. Nothing at all. Everything just went completely silent. All three of us made it back into the house. And then the entire night, everyone in the house that knew how to operate a gun safely had one in their hands or on their person. It stayed that way until the next morning. Then the next morning came around. Against everything that was screaming in the back of our minds, me, my cousin, my uncle, and dad went back out into the woods. We were trying to see if we could find any bodies of the two creatures that we had killed. To our disappointment, we found nothing, except, of course, the blood of the creature I myself had dumped the rest of the mag into. That was all we found, just that one pool of blood.
And there you have it, folks, today's bonus. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone's simply treated with the respect we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.